All right, doing a little implementation breakdown for this little sci-fi level ambience um, set of ambient sounds that I designed. So first look through, I did this all in Pro Tools. It's my MO right now, just from doing a lot of post-production as well. So uh, just organization, I've got my input tracks where my mic is coming in and where I would record things with the mic if I needed it. Build tracks for building dialogue, and I do have some VO in here, a little bit of my own and some computer generated as well, so I did that in here. Dialogue processing tracks, where I'll route dialogue to these to get, the effects processing I need, and then re-record it. I re-record everything here, dialogue or effects, and then, can keep working with it or export it if that's my final. There's a set of cut tracks for sound effects. There's a set of stuff that I'm doing on synthesizers specifically, and there's actually some instrument tracks at the bottom that I was using, and then I drag it up here and work with it. Things from the cut track and the synth tracks are generally kind of raw source, and then this is where I'm building if I'm doing layering or further effects. There's my processing tracks for the dialogue, for the effects, just like there was for the dialogue. Only these I have just preloaded with just pretty much everything in the arsenal. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep up with this approach. I think it gets impossible to basically maintain settings. If I want to use this plugin twice, I can either open another one or I just have to change the settings. So I'm probably going to switch to a little more a system that's based a little more around the specific types of effects I'm designing and keeping a set of tracks just for that. But this is what I have right now. Mix processing, if there's anything I'm doing overall for the mix for mastering these, which mostly I think there wasn't in this one. There's my mix downs. So some sub mixes, which is all in here with one of these two things. And either I re-record and drag it down, or I was mastering to here. I think it was mostly just re-recording on my re-record tracks and then bring it down here. Playback, just my outputs. And when I would bring in tracks from somewhere else, which occasionally happened, I bring them in here so I didn't get too lost with what needed to be brought into the system, kind of. Okay, so just a quick tour of this. I just figured out at the top of doing all this that I wanted certain kind of things probably, and dropped a bunch of markers. I didn't end up using every single thing, but it was just my reminder and organization for this, and kept everything like a half hour apart in the timeline, so there's plenty of room to just noodle with stuff. So footsteps, I did make them, you'll hear them, but I'll mostly turn them off because this was about ambience. I didn't really fully develop the footstep system. It's very basic and doesn't succeed at everything yet. So I was pretty happy with most of what I came up with there, and then this one I didn't even really, I wanted that to be from a hollow grate, and it doesn't sound enough like these. So, but I realized I wasn't gonna need them, so I stopped working on them. Space drone. So I just kind of wanted the drone of a ship in space. It's not dead silent, which of course would be more accurate, unless it's moving, powered. And this ship, actually, I did want this ship to be moving, but also kind of broken. Creaks and groans. So, and then a lot of this stuff is layered library sounds and recorded sounds of my own. That's the case with a lot of this stuff. Some of it is also synthesized, and where it was appropriate to get a little synthy. Yeah, a lot of layers there. I don't think that's the final version of that. So engines and motors and servos, little UI alarm. I think I have an alarm section, but that was more for the bigger ship alarms, and I didn't end up doing any dialogue. So dialogue, there's two approaches I took. I used the computer voice where I should be playing these. Let me solo some of these. So I use the computer voice for these. And then I came up with 5 versions of it and divided each into 3 pieces of identical length so that I could randomize between them. And the idea here is that this is in the story as I wanted to tell it was, you know, that you kind of plopped in the middle of this malfunctioning ship somehow and trying to figure things out. And so the futzing here I chose sort of strategically to obscure certain words certain times and other words other times. So if you're listening closely enough times, you're putting together the pieces of the puzzle of what's actually being said, which maybe theoretically is significant for the game itself. So you get 2 different pieces of that node number that might be important. And that one's just a mass. Oh, there's a 0, 1, right? So, and the game randomizes those. We'll see that in a sec. And then this is my voice and heavily futz for a busted radio in the console of the front of the bridge. And this is making up an alien language, an alien transmission that's busted. Same thing, problem solving, puzzle solving. So further on, reactor, we have a reactor meltdown. Some synthy things in there for sure. Me playing around with some fun synths. Love that static electric hum, and then the whole thing sort of amps up with little one-shots of rattles and things baked into it. And then I made myself a separate beginning and end. And the idea was actually to have those separate so they could be different lengths or try to pull some other stuff, but I couldn't get that system working in time for this challenge we were doing, so I just baked it all into one long thing. I have some sparking lights, so I made some sparks. I think that's just 3 layers of library sounds that I combined in different ways and messed with EQ and compression and other fun things. Different ambience for each room. There's that overall rumble, but each room has a little layer on top of it. And there we go. So there's my Pro Tools layout and the work I did. I could go in forever for like, oh, let's find the specific sensor things, but I don't want this tape to be 90 minutes long. So next, I just try to treat this as a professional situation. So we've got a delivery folder here, and I dated it and kind of labeled it with what kinds of things are in it, and then developed a naming scheme for myself for this specific project, kind of the way I think I would do it in most projects, unless a team had something specific in mind. So sound effects for footsteps, sound effects for area loops, dialogue. Now this is the way I was originally going to do it, 24 separate pieces, 2 versions of each, and it would just play them continuously. But again, that's a version I also had trouble with, so I ended up with this instead. 5 pieces, 3 versions. So there's dialogue, voiceover, there's the alien transmission with the same approach. Area loops, one-shots, OS one-shots. So that's pretty straightforward. And on to the Unreal. So I may bring the footsteps in occasionally just so you can hear kind of the reverb of the space, but I'll mostly mute them. So let's mute those. So back here you got some source loops in the corners, very subtle. But maybe this is closer to where the engines actually are. You got some steam rising up. This level had none of the dynamic visuals in it. This level was very static. So I changed all the colors of the lights, add some sparks, some steam. Other places there's a little bits of smoke and more sparks. I made some of these lights flicker with that looping random system. See if we can catch any of that. It's in the main video. We don't need to wait for it, I suppose. But so I'm going to just try to point out all the elements. Each of those is a actor with a sound directly attached to it, a source loop. And there you go. These pipes are yeah, the same thing, like just source loops for the pipes. Yeah, each room had its own ambience. Right now that reactor meltdown is going, so it's going to be a little too loud to hear, but I'll turn on the footsteps and walk from room to room. And this is just ambient audio volumes. Each of the 3 rectangular rooms is just a rectangular prism audio volume. So, footsteps. So I think I could make the change of room tone a little more pronounced. Like you can hear the change in reverb pretty clearly. This is where the announcements are coming from. You can hear the one-shots randomly spawning around us, for the creaks and groans. Again, reverb changed a bit. Different area loop for this area of the ship. And reverb as well. I'm gonna turn the footsteps off while we watch the reactor here for a sec. Those lights, there we go. The lights get brighter and brighter, and I just timed it out so that they dim when the thing fails. That was interesting, that dimmed a little bit later. I was going to keep going and have to look at that. So there's some sparking and smoke here. And we've got 2 speakers. One's looping that alarm, simple area loop, I believe. And one is doing this random dialogue system with the alien transmission. I believe this smoke over here has a subtle, I turned it way down. I didn't want it filling the room. It doesn't need to be much. That has a simple sound loop attached to it as well. So I think we covered all that, sort of the different things that are in there. And I'm gonna head over to some blueprints here. So there's my footstep system. Not for the design of the triggering it, but of course just the playback. It's a random container with, it's like 9 ended up at the top. It's lovely. Modulated with some pitch and volume, typical things. Here, this is a few of the simple just looping stuff, area loops or source loops. So this particular one is the beeping alarm, and there's a little bit of pitch modulation on there so that it sounds a little bit faulty. And same thing, I don't think I've yet completely got this where I want it to be. But, same thing, pipes. This is just loop, same thing, a little bit of a pitch and volume modulator. So they're different. Here we go to the sparking lights. They, each time a light actually dims is its own thing, and it calls this once, and it'll play a random sparking sound from here. Same thing, a little pitch and volume modulation. This is the camera shake. I found this on a YouTube video, somebody describing a nice, simple camera shake implementation. So that's its own little piece there. Here's the first-person character blueprint attached to the character walking around the room. So I did a few things in here. It's all mostly, this is where the footsteps and the camera shake are. And that's this bit. And so basically I made my own custom tick here. to not rely on the event tick. And the length of this variable, whatever, I don't remember what the default is, half a second. So it does a half a second timer in this case, because for the moment for testing, that was just what worked and what did the trick, but I'll probably need to tweak it to make it more realistic and do things or check things more often. But so it's setting this timer and starting this camera shake and checking if it should be still shaking and either starting or stopping it through this mechanism here. This was one of the things I was trying to do to basically start developing the system further. So that's why it's just a orphan out there. And then this is the most of it. Yeah. So items on beginning play. Once gameplay starts, we start a timer for all the one-shots and things that are sort of attached to that. We'll get there in a sec. Start a timer for that reactor, which is just a looping random countdown. It'll kind of select an amount of time and count down, do it, and then do it. And then we're filling this array with the choice of lights that can flicker. And it's going to call from this array to make the lights flicker. There's the overload timer that it started in the beginning. So I have 71 seconds plus or minus 13 is what ended up feeling good. Delegate reaction timer. So this is the event that it's going to call every time the timer ends. And it's basically spawning a sound on the actor, on the player. That's interesting. Yeah, I kind of think that I needed, somehow that got lost. So I wanted to attach it to the actor and put it within a radius, but it doesn't seem to be doing that. Starts the reactor timer going again, which is this, again, it's just calling itself again there. And then it also is starting the reactor lighting. There's 3 different lights in there, so it's starting it for all 3 of them. So it spawns that. Oh no, right. This is not the one shot. This is spawning the sound of the reactor itself. Right, there we go. And then the lights that also run that same. They run together, right? The lights and the audio. Here's the one-shot timer that also started in the beginning when the gameplay starts. Start one-shot timer. So start one-shot timer runs this timer, 16 seconds or so, randomized. Delegate one-shot timer. So this, once the timer ends, it starts all this mess, which is looking for a location in the navigable radius. It's just as a way to choose a spot near the actor and then have this sound spawn. Now the sounds themselves are futzed, so they sound like they're coming through the wall. But then this way they also get sort of that reverb on them from being in the room, because when you hear something through the wall, you're still then hearing that through the wall sound reverberating in your own room. So it was just one attempt of a way to get some realism for it. We're randomizing so that not every time that we play a one shot, we're going to get some lights flickering. I was worried about this seeming a little too synchronous, like, oh, the lights flicker every time there's a one shot, but some of my one shots, a lot of them are kind of fade in and that sort of thing. So I don't think it actually ever feels that way. So it just calls these functions to select a light, run the light flickering thing, and then start this one shot timer again. Same, just very similar to the reactor timer. And there's the light flickering. This was interesting because I don't do visuals, and it was neat to explore how to control the lights themselves. But basically, I set a number of flickers and have a counter ready so that it can count down its flickers. And it gets the light color of a random light from this array that I filled in the beginning. And it stores that so we can return that light to its original color, because I didn't want to just have all the lights end up all wonky colors as they, as it progresses through flickering different ones. It seemed better to return them to normal. And then flicker gap, this is a variable to set the time between flickers, I believe. So I think it's just kind of initializing that. And it'll do one flicker. So that's each time it flickers the light. No, that's when it starts flickering the light. There we go. And it'll do one flicker. All right, so then we call do one flicker, and it's going to randomize the gap between flickers. So it'll wait that random gap. When it's completed, it'll spawn the sound at the location of the light that is flickering, and then it'll dim the light. Dim the light, so it randomizes the amount to dim the light, finds that light, sets the light to that color. This is the easiest way I could find to do this, is actually just lowering all the colors by proportional amounts, the R, G, and B, then you basically get the same effect as dimming the light. I couldn't figure out a way to do it with an intensity yet. I'm still looking, and that'd be fun to learn. Delay, for me, this was I think it's in between. Oh, this is the amount of the light time that the light is actually dimmed, so it's the same each time it flickers, and then it resets the light. Resetting the light is getting that original starting color and setting that to be the light color, and then decrementing the counter. And if the counter has gotten down to 0, then it's false and we're just done. But if it's still above 0, then we're just going to do one flicker and it starts back up the top. And I think I got everything. Cool. Love to hear everybody's thoughts. All the ways I could have done this more efficiently, I'm sure. All the cool functionality or things I've yet to learn about. But this was a ton of fun, and thanks for watching and listening.